All right, everybody, in today's video, we're going to be joined by Alexi Lalas. He's a former player for the US men's national team, featuring in 2 World Cups with them, which included a match against Iran in the 1998 World Cup, and is currently a commentator and pundit for all things US soccer when it comes to the national team, MLS, for Fox Soccer. And in this video, we're going to be discussing all things when it comes to the Iranian national team going into this World Cup. What his thoughts are about all the news of them possibly withdrawing, them possibly not withdrawing, and everything in between. What it was like facing off against them in the 1998 World Cup, and closing off on how he thinks this national team can do in their group at this World Cup. But before we get into it, boys and girls, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, as we're on the road to 6,000 subscribers before the World Cup starts, and I know with your guys' help we can reach that goal. But without further ado, let's jump into it. Well, first and foremost, Alexi, thank you so much for taking the time to come on for us to do this video and just kind of talk about this topic, because I definitely think we hear a lot from the Iranian football fan, just Iranian people themselves, their perspective on all of this. But to get someone like your perspective, who, you know, you faced off against Iran in a World Cup, you're a pundit in the US soccer sphere, and you're going to be covering this World Cup, I think a lot of people are going to value and appreciate, you know, your input and your opinions on all of this. So just wanted to get your thoughts on your thoughts on everything on the situation so far, as we're like, what? I don't know, a little, we're getting very close to the World Cup starting. So yeah.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you for having me. You know, the reason why I want to do your show and why I enjoy talking to you is because you're knowledgeable. I think you're interesting. I think you're entertaining, and I think you provide some perspective. You know, I live in a world that is often in the the sound bite and the 15 seconds here and stuff like that, and so it's fun to go on other shows and talk to, like I said, smart people like you, and maybe go a little bit more in depth of what's going on. You know, as you mentioned, we're barreling down the pike towards this World Cup. It's coming fast for all 3 countries. I think we are prepared. With what we can see, but it's also going to be a work in progress. Now, it's also I think of 2 words when I think of what's coming this summer: opportunity and responsibility. And I think this applies to Canada, Mexico, and the United States. But obviously, I'm here in the U.S., and so I talk relative to the United States. But opportunity to get a lot of people into the tent when it comes to soccer. Maybe some people, and a lot of people that maybe haven't followed soccer or don't watch soccer as much as as far as we have come. The reality is we're still not a soccer-centric type of nation, and so this kind of moment to celebrate the game and to celebrate our country and countries is a great opportunity, but it's also a responsibility. And I want to make sure that when people are coming here for the World Cup and having this summer vacation, if you will, and this American vacation through the lens of the World Cup, that they have a kick-ass time, that they see things they never seen before, that they have wonderful memories, and that in like an advertisement, they take back a positive experience and message back to wherever they're coming from, whether it's Iran or any other place out there, or even if they're just going back to a place in the United States. So that's a long way of saying that I'm really excited about what's to come. Having said that, there will be things that we can anticipate, things that we can't. This is a World Cup. This is not only the biggest World Cup in history, but I think it's going to go down as the biggest cultural event in history. And therefore, there are stories and narratives that are going to go well beyond the actual kicking of the ball and the winning of the games here or there. And it's not just a celebration from an American perspective, not for nothing, on our 250th birthday, but I think it's also going to be a collective celebration of all of these different countries and cultures that are coming as guests to our country, which obviously includes Iran.
Yeah, I mean, you can even add more layers, not even just talking about Iran. For a lot of like the debutant World Cup participants, like the Uzbekistans, the Cape Verdes, I mean, these are not only historic moments for the footballing nations, but for the fans themselves. So yeah, I think you bring up like a really good point when it comes to talking about, I like the 2 words you used. I think that's a good way to put it. For hosting a World Cup. And obviously there's always been controversy. It's not even just this World Cup in specific, the previous one, 2018, like there's always going to be topics of discussion that people will not be happy about, that need to be discussed. And I think a big one for this going into this World Cup is about, Iran and them coming to this World Cup. It seemed like it almost was like a foregone conclusion that they were going to withdraw, but that was just not exactly the case. And if you read in between the lines, AFC have come out saying that no, Iran is not withdrawn. Iranian football president and in the federation has said we are gonna play in this World Cup. We're not boycotting it, but we are boycotting the US. I don't exactly understand what that means, but and there's obviously been as well the speculation of, oh, could Iran go into Group A to play in Mexico's group? But I never thought that was it didn't make sense in my opinion. Yes, you play all 3 group stage games in Mexico, but what if you advance and it makes it a whole messy situation and things like that? For you, how have you interpreted all of this? Because that's just I'm just reading briskly, surface level on all that stuff because there's been so much that has been discussed.
Yeah. So a couple of things here. One, I really hope that Iran participates in this World Cup. Obviously, from a competitive standpoint, they deserve it. They earned it. The players and this team and this country to represent this country at the World Cup. I also hope that they continue as is scheduled right now to play their games in the United States and they don't move them. But more importantly, and I hope that this summer, from an Iranian perspective, is used to celebrate what could be or what hopefully is coming. I think an element of hope attached to this Iranian team, I think, is something that is necessary, and I think that is something in the offing if they play it correctly. I hope that when the Iranian players come here, that they have a wonderful experience. Obviously, we want all players to be safe and not to be fearful of anything. And I do think that if Iran plays here, and I like I said, I don't have any reason to believe that they are not going to do that. They will be celebrated. I'm here in Los Angeles right now, and obviously one of the unique aspects of our country is our incredible history of diversity and all of these different cultures and the melting pot and all of that. I mean, I remember a few weeks ago when this all started, driving down the 405 freeway and seeing people with Iranian flags and U.S. flags out their window. And so, rather than delve into all the politics of it, I want people to celebrate what Iran, I guess, was and what Iran can be relative to what's going on. And some of the greatest and most powerful vehicles, if you will, or platforms, if you will, are sports. And certainly when it comes to a World Cup with the global eyes on you, I think that there's a real opportunity. Now, this is also about competition. We all know that going to a World Cup is nothing new necessarily for Iran. Getting out of the group, that's new, and that would be historic. And again, this is the biggest World Cup in history with 48 teams, 104 games. We over at Fox are really excited about being able to televise this and tell all of these stories both on and off the field. And then the competition on the field. And you look at their group over there in G with Belgium, Egypt, and New Zealand. I think that this is a group that they absolutely can come out of. And in doing so, not just make history, but kind of be celebrated. And ultimately, I think that's what I want to see. I want to see this team be celebrated for, again, their incredible abilities on the field, but also kind of what they represent in the global aspect. And sports are always political. That's just the way that it is. And geopolitics are always going to be part of sports. And I know some people feel like, this is an escape. And certainly from a Fox perspective on our sports broadcast, we're going to talk about the game and whether Iran is doing well and whether they're defending and who the players are and all that kind of stuff. But there are certainly layers and there's certainly other stories. We're not naive to that fact, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it lends to the nuance and the color, if you will, of a World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a few videos since all this news has broken out talking about it, and I share very much a similar sentiment to you. You're in one of the cities that they'll play in, and I am in the other city that they'll be playing in Seattle, and so we're both in two cities and populaces that are very condensed of Iranians. I mean, especially California, especially Seattle, and then you can even add Vancouver, and Vancouver's not far from Seattle, so you rope all of those in. And you have a mixture of possibly mainly just Iran home games in a sense. That could be a very strong possibility.
Oh no, it will be an Iranian home game when they're playing down here at SoFi here in Los Angeles, and obviously up in up in Seattle. And I think that there is a real desire for the Iranian American community, or people that are able to travel, if they are able to travel here, to celebrate this team. And in doing so, celebrate this country, again, as to what it can be. And, I don't need to tell you, but the pride that Iranians feel for their country, sometimes it can manifest in different ways. And, when you are seeing this team, and as you mentioned in the open, I have a long history when it comes to this Iranian team, going back to 1998 when, as a member of the U.S. team, we played them. And, times change attitudes, times change circumstances. Back in 1998, for example, it was much more adversarial, if you will, But even in the last World Cup that I worked, there was a kind of melancholy to the Iranian team, in that it's not that they didn't want to be there. It just, and maybe you can elaborate on this, but from afar where we were watching, and we were watching this team, there was a kind of sadness to that team. And so I hope that, we find something completely different this summer. And I know it's difficult, and it's difficult for players to compartmentalize, but professional players are pretty good at doing that. But you kind of have to put all of that out and find the good and find the positive right now. And, again, the unique aspect of the United States and Canada, for that matter, in that there are going to be home games in maybe a way that we've never seen before, other than if you go back to 1994, because of the diaspora, because of, the ethnic communities that we have and that we have nourished and, make our country what it is. And look, I played for the U.S., so at times we were actually the away team, sometimes playing in the United States. This is just part and parcel of being in this country and culture. So I'm really looking forward to the pageantry and the color and the emotion, and like I said, the pride of these games, whether it's with Iran, as we know, or even some of these smaller teams, Cape Verde and Curacao, and as you mentioned, Uzbekistan and Jordan, Haiti coming back for the first time since 1974. And there's going to be stories for us to tell on the field and off the field relative to these countries and cultures and where they are in history and where they have been.
Yeah, I mean, I think you brought up a lot of great points there. And I think when you look back to do a little deep dive, you talked about that 2022 World Cup. And I love that we have your perspective on it, because it's not only you faced off against them, you also got to commentate over the most recent match between them in the 2022 World Cup, which had a lot of weight to it for differing factors for each national team. I mean, I think especially for the US, like, let's quickly talk about their side to, little throwback right here talking about it. They hadn't been in the previous World Cup. Them winning this game, they hadn't won any of their games so far in the World Cup. They needed to win this game to advance. Iran, on the flip side, that was their third consecutive qualification. They have been so close to finally making it to the round of 16. And then obviously all the political stuff. And I talked about this in my previous video I did, where I talked about, all this news about Iran playing, not playing in this World Cup. And I think a lot of times with a lot of national teams, you can separate the politics with the football, but it seems like with the Iranian national team in particular, it bleeds so much into it, in my opinion. I think from all national teams, since I've been watching the sport, since I was young, Iran in particular, it's just like it cannot be separate. There's no winning in a sense. Like when you look back at 2022, the weight that they held because of what was going on in the country then. And you saw how it affected them, especially in that opening game against England. I've never seen Iran play that bad. I mean, I haven't been watching them since 2014, since I was 14 years old, but I've never seen them play that badly. And it was a shell shock to me. And then to see them then rebound against Wales, it almost seems like I think the gas ran out in the USA game. I think they gave all they could, and sometimes it as you said, it almost looked like at that point there was I don't think we have enough to still keep being here. And and I felt bad about that, because I think they could have done something, because you see how they played in 2018 when all the fans were behind them. There wasn't really any noise in a sense. They could really focus on the football. And I think now going into this World Cup, you're kind of seeing that in a sense. I've been fortunate enough in the last couple of years to build more of a rapport with a lot of the players on the national team. And I think, in my eyes, not to speak on their behalves, I think a lot of them are excited to play in the US. I think a lot of them have some fondness of MLS. I mean, many of them have told me they've gotten offers from teams in MLS. They are intrigued one day to come play here. They see they have fondness of this country. And I feel like it sometimes, I don't know how it kind of gets mixed into things, but like how people think, oh, Iranians don't like Americans, things like, no. I think there's a strong fondness. I don't know how in the news it gets ruffled up, but players, even myself, even people in Iran, when I was younger, when I used to go there, they have a strong fondness of the United States. And I personally don't think players are worried about their safety. I think it is a lot of just the political side of things bleeding into all of this.
Yeah, look, I want to be very, very clear. I'm not naive or idealistic. And some of the problems and the geopolitical situations. I mean, those are real, and that's real life stuff. This is just kicking the ball. But mentioned, for example, a couple World Cups ago, I was fortunate enough to go to Russia. Right, as a kid of the 70s and 80s, growing up in the United States. Here I am sitting in Red Square, okay, in Russia. And obviously people understand the long history and the geopolitical history when it comes to both of our countries. And, here I am, a kid who grew up in the suburbs of Detroit, and I'm sitting, and working every single day in Moscow at Red Square. And, it was wonderful to see the pride in which the Russians took to be hosting this. The curiosity of Americans and who we are and who we aren't, to be quite honest with you, the discovery of who we are and who we aren't. And again, this isn't me being like all Pollyanna about the situation. And so to your point, I think that whether it's the Iranian team, the Iranian players, or just the Iranian community right now, the opportunity to celebrate this, I think they will be embraced. And I hope, my fervent hope is that America looks at this team in a way that it manifests what hopefully is coming in the future. And that is, a safe and better Iran, one that all Iranians can be proud of, one that all Iranians, especially Iranians that we have here in the United States. I mean, I'll have conversations and they will tell me, and I've seen the pictures and I've seen the videos of what this country once was. And look, it's not as if it's, I'm sure that it has wonderful, parts of it right now, but I think the potential of what it could be and, the return of what it once was, but also in this new day and age with the new generation, I think, again, this is the team that represents the promise. And this is the team that represents the future. And I think Americans will grasp on to that, regardless of what is happening right now, as serious as it is. And I think we're looking for kind of feel-good stories. And I think in no way, shape, or form will this Iranian team, individually as players or collectively, be looked at as anything but positive going forward. And, the whistle's going to blow and the competition. And I want to see, again, this team do well. There are third place teams that are coming out of groups here. So if there ever was a chance for Iran to get out of the group and create history in that moment, it is right now. And if and when that happens for this team, I don't need to tell you, they will be celebrated for doing something that has not been done before. Can you imagine that game if they were to come out and now you're in the round of 32, a knockout game for Iran? Probably in the United States. I'd have to look at the different pathways that show up, but that would be pretty cool in terms of the historical importance, not just from a soccer perspective, but from, like I said, a cultural perspective.
To circle back to the 98 World Cup, I want to kind of touch upon that a little bit because I talked about in the beginning, you were part of the USA team when Iran faced off against the United States in that French World Cup in 1998, where there was a lot of talk going into that World Cup match between the US and Iran. Iran had yet to have won a World Cup game. You guys didn't have quite the start you guys want. I think there was some again, I'm speaking based off of what I've read, the stories that have been told. I wasn't alive in 98, that there was some promise for the group that you got, like for you, the USA group at that World Cup. For you, I kind of want you to talk about what was things that you saw that you could speak about from that match against Iran in 98.
All right. So first off, from a practical perspective for your viewers, this was back in the 1900s, back in the previous century, before you were around and most of your viewers were around. Our group was Germany, Iran, and Yugoslavia. And Your first game was against Germany. So, the chances are, unless lightning strikes and the soccer gods completely smile upon you, you're going to lose, which is ultimately what happened. But when we were looking in that group, we said, all right, where's our 3 points coming from them, right? It's coming from Iran, all right, with all due respect. And Iran was looking at us as in the same way, I think. So you take your chances against Germany, whatever happens, but chances are you're going to lose. Now you get your 3 points against Iran, and now it comes down to that third game against Yugoslavia, which, you can argue who's better and all that kind of stuff, and you're going to need in that moment to find a point in order to come out. Best laid plans, right? So that was the actual practical competitive part of the group phase. And again, Iran, I think, was looking at us in the same way. So competitively, this was, hey, winner take all. If there was ever a chance to advance, this was kind of what we needed to do. And we had, certainly problems when it came to that team. The cultural part of it, which was certainly in the news, and we didn't have social media in the way that we have nowadays, so it wasn't constantly in your face, but we knew. And again, growing up and what Iran was in the United States and, all of that type of history. And this was obviously, more than 25 years ago. So things were, I think, much more heated in that moment and ratcheted up. And maybe with social media, it gets a little bit more diluted. So all the media that you were able to see was few and far between, but it meant it had that much more power. And so we knew that there were considerations and there were going to be repercussions well beyond the actual kicking of the ball with this. And whether it was, what we saw in the media, obviously security and all of that and going back and forth. And then, you actually have to get on the field. And, we arranged before the game to do a intermingling type of shot with all the players and flowers and all that kind of stuff. And, we did it because that was what we were told to do. But I don't need to tell you, players are ruthless in the most positive way. And so again, they're human and they can be affected by what's going on outside of the field. But once that whistle blows, you kind of say, all right, this is the game and this is what I'm in many cases being paid, and many cases being paid a lot of money, and I'm representing my country, and this is the World Cup. I need to get the job done. It didn't go well for us in that day. And once we lost to Iran and we saw how much it meant to them, it wasn't that it didn't mean us, but we didn't just lose a game. We lost to Iran. And so again, it took on more meaning. But from a practical perspective, our World Cup was not practical. It was over because we had lost the first 2 games. So we weren't going through in that third game, no matter what.
Did you have any interactions, like specifically with any of the players? Because that group that you faced off against in '98 had a lot of iconic players like the Ali Dais, the Mehdi Matavikias, a lot of very iconic Iranian footballers that Asian and Iranian football fans still talk about to this day. I was just curious, did you have any interactions with any of them? Any like specific story or anything like that?
No, I mean, they were one of the few teams that we had not played before. A lot of World Cups, we actually ended up playing these teams before. And so it's not that we didn't have a knowledge and an understanding of what we were up against, but there wasn't a familiarity in terms of playing against them or with many of them. And so really the first time that we met them was when we were on the field and, going through the opening ceremonies and all that kind of stuff. But we watched them play. And we recognized that we were probably going to have more of the ball at times. And if you watch, I think one of the goals was just a clinical type of counterattack. And, they made us pay. And they were incredibly patient in the way that they played. And not just saw the moment, but more importantly, were able to capitalize and harness that moment when it comes. And that's what great teams do on the counter. And so they lull you into a false sense of security as they did, and then bang, they strike. And so we didn't play our best that day, and obviously we lost the game, but I don't think it was a smash and grab. I don't think that when you look at the quality ultimately of that Iranian team, I think, as you mentioned, the individual talent and the collective understanding of how they wanted to play that game, ultimately on that day, they were the better team.
We talked a little bit about the challenges the players might face. I talked about how in 2022 in Qatar, we saw that there was a lot of challenges that the Iranian players faced at that World Cup. Like I talked about the England game, we saw how it impacted them on their performance on the field. I think a big statement they made was, not singing the national anthem, and I thought that was huge. But again, you saw how the players were able to perform, and I think there was a lot of really high highs and a lot of low lows. There was not, wouldn't say there was a lot of control. And I don't blame the players. Honestly, looking back at the World Cup, emotions aside, looking at it now with hindsight 4 years later, I genuinely think the players did everything that they could at that World Cup to get one good win against Wales. Like, I think it's as good as it's going to get to at least keep US in it, playing them to the sword. I think it was as good as it's going to get. And going into this World Cup, I'm really curious how this group of players, who it's very similar, if I'm going to be transparent, it's very similar to the team of 2022, which as well was relatively similar to the team of 2018. So it's like we're going back for a third time. 4 years older, can that experience help them? Will they be able to control their emotions in the moment and with everything that might go on? Because you talked about how games are going to be in LA, games are going to be in Seattle here with where I'm at. And there's going to be a lot of that Iranian dysphoria, saying things, politically on and off the field. And for you, in your opinion, what are some of the challenges the players might face, and can they handle it? And, kind of that sphere of conversation when it comes to the national team.
Yeah, I mean, look, I wish that I could tell you that I have an experience like that, but I don't. I mean, I live in what I feel is the greatest country in the world. It's certainly not perfect, but it does afford me freedoms, if you will, and I am privileged, if you will, to not have to deal with a lot of the stuff that Iranian soccer players, by the way, men's, women's, whatever, have to deal with. And so it's an added burden. Now, I will say that they've probably, if one can get used to it, I suppose that they have gotten used to it, and they have had to deal now for a long time of, it's not just the pressure of going out there and kicking the ball and winning. It's the pressure that's coming from home. It's the pressure of being this team, and the questions that you face, and the scrutiny. And I can't imagine it. It must be very, very difficult to have to not only do your job, by the way, at the highest level in front of, in this case, from a World Cup, billions of people, but to also have to deal with all of this political stuff that's going on, and you individually, and you and your family, and all of that kind of stuff. So I give all the players, again, men's, women's, all ages, I give them incredible credit for being able to go out there and to perform under what is oftentimes, a lot of pressure. Some that we see and some that we know about, and let's be honest, some that we probably don't know about. And I try to give grace. I don't treat them like children. I try to give these players that I talk about grace in that they are humans. And I'll criticize if you're not doing whatever and stuff like that. And there could be reasons why that's happening. But I think maybe more so in a tournament and in a World Cup, understanding that there is a whole lot more going on that we don't see and that we don't know, that absolutely could be affecting these humans on the field. And that at times they're able to not only get the job done, but to rise above it and to star. I mean, again, that's a credit to whoever the individuals are, like I said, when it comes to a national team or, men's, women's, or any type of an Iranian player. From a practical perspective, right? I mean, first game's against New Zealand, right? You'll take that all day. I mean, look, you got to find a win somewhere in the group. It's not a gimme by any stretch of the imagination. Nothing is a gimme. But hey, if you come out of the gate, and again, I love my New Zealand friends, but it is not going to be a New Zealand crowd when it comes to what's going to happen. So I think they're going to come out in that first game. They're going to walk out into that stadium And it's going to be a lot of Iranian Americans that are screaming and yelling. And again, representing that pride and that moment when they get to celebrate this country through this team on the field against New Zealand. And can you imagine? That place is going to be popping, my friend. It's going to be fun. And if you get that 3 points, now you're cruising, okay? Because your next game's against Belgium. We saw Belgium play last night, right? Very good team. A team that most people would say should beat Iran, but it's your second game, okay? And so you can afford to get a little cagey and smart, and we've already talked about how Iran can do something like that. So who knows? You take your chances against them, and then it's probably going to come down to that game against Egypt up there in your neck of the woods up there in Seattle, and that's going to be fun. But as I said before, I think that it's going to be a lot of fans for this team that are excited to see them do some good things.
I think, you take the political side of things out of it. A lot of these players are just people just like us, and they just have a dream to kick a ball around, which you were able to achieve. I can't say the same for myself, but hoping for the best for Iran going into the World Cup, and they get the opportunity to play, and you see what happens. 22 men with short shorts kicking the ball around. Some magic could happen, some might not. We don't know.
Thank you so much for having me on. And I hope, whether it's Iran or any other team, that again, it's a celebration. It's a celebration, obviously, of the sport. It's a celebration of the countries involved, including Iran. And I'll just finish it with this story. A couple World Cups ago, Iran's been to many World Cups, right? But a couple World Cups ago, Panama went to the World Cup for the first time. And I'll never forget, we have this wonderful moment when we're broadcasting where we pan down during the national anthem. And, it panned down the Panamanian players' faces, and there's tears streaming down their eyes. And in that moment, it wasn't about winning soccer games. It wasn't about scoring goals or anything like that. It was about, in that moment, representing a country that you love, representing and showing the pride that you feel on a global platform for this country and culture that means so much to you. And none of us are ever going to say, our countries and cultures are perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But there is a connection, whether you're in the country or you're not in the country, whether you have a long history or a short period, there is a connection with the countries that we are from and the countries that we have a history with. And so again, I hope when it comes to this summer, when over there in SoFi, and I'm watching that moment, and they're panning down the faces of the players, they're also panning up into the stands where all of the thousands, and there will be thousands of Iranian Americans that are there supporting this team and cheering this team on, because it is the manifestation of a country that they recognize isn't perfect, that they want to be better, and that hopefully at some point in the future is better, so that they can all celebrate this country that has given so much and has such a wonderful history.
But boys and girls, as I say at the end of every single video, mine and Alexi's opinion only matters so much. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below of everything we talked about. Don't forget, smash the like button on this video. Let's try to get over 100 likes again for good juju for Iran going into this World Cup. And if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to go check out this video next, and then click over here as I post content weekly on the channel, and you don't want to miss it. But boys and girls, I hope you'll have a lovely day.